Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Boyer. We're back, and we're going to continue on with our coding lesson. If you remember, we said that the three programming languages used in web development that all web developers need to know are HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And you remember that HTML is a language that defines the content of a web page, and JavaScript controls the behavior of the web page, and then finally CSS makes it look pretty. It's the language that defines how a page looks. So we're going to use CSS, or cascading style sheets language, to define the style of this web page, and we're going to use that to define the style of the buttons. We're going to make them look a little bit fancier. So what we want to do is we actually want to make these buttons, give them a color, and we'll give them a certain appearance. So if you remember, in previous lessons, I've given you a link to the W3 Schools colors, and there's a site that has color names. And here's a list of 140 standard colors used in web development, and they have the names. And they also have a little code here. You'll notice that dark orange, for example, has the code hashtag FF8C00, and the FF defines how much red is in the color, and the 8C defines how much green, and the 00 defines how much blue. It's an RGB code, and it simply defines how the colors are mixed on the screen to create those colors. So we don't have to remember those codes, we just need to remember the names, and we can take a look at the color on the screen here. So we have all of these colors to choose from, and you can actually create just about any combination of about 64,000 colors by mixing and matching the RGB codes. Anyway, we're going to use some standard codes here. In this case, we're going to use orange and dark orange, and I'll explain how we're going to use those here momentarily. Okay, so in order to tell our web page or define some styles and define how things look, we need to first create a section in the head that has our style in it. So we'll go to the end of the script tag here, and right below it we'll create another space, and we'll define the style tag. And the style tag, just like the script tag, just defines a section that contains the information or the code that we need. So we're going to start and end the style tag, and notice now if we click in there that both of them are lit up, and we have a space in between to start our style tags. So instead of defining all of these tags up front and then putting them in, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just define the tags as we go along. A little learning by doing here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to define the style for a button, so we'll call it a button style. And so we'll indent by clicking the tab key on the keyboard. So you want to hit tab once, and then we're going to type .button, and that defines our style. And then to add that code, just like we did with JavaScript, we're going to use a curly brace to encapsulate the code. So I'm going to hit another space and then use a closing curly brace. And in the between, we're going to add the tags and the code for our styles. So the very first thing, we want to change our buttons over here. I've got the message button here and the clear button here. Notice when I hover over them, I get a little change in the border and not much else. The pointer doesn't change, the colors don't change, they just stay kind of plain, and it's just a basic generic button. We want to make it a little fancier. So the first thing we want to do is change the color of the button, and that's actually a background color. So we're going to type the word background dash color, and we'll give it a colon and type the word orange. And just like we did in code, when you're done with a line of code, you have to terminate it with a semicolon. So we're going to add that, and then we need another line that tells us what style of border we want. Now we don't want a border at all. We're going to make these some plain kind of modern style buttons, so we're simply going to say none. Again, terminate it with a semicolon. A color. Now this color applies to the font, and we're going to make that white. So again, we've got a Reedley Tiger's Orange with white font on the front, and then we're going to add some space around it. We'll make those buttons a little bit bigger. So if you look right now, there's not a whole lot of space around the buttons that are on our web page or on our Hello World example. We want to add some. So we're going to add what's called padding. This is extra space. And we're going to define all of the padding here. So the first one is 15 pixels, and that applies to the top and bottom, and 25 pixels to the left and right. So 15px applies to top and bottom, 25px padding to the left and right, and again we terminate that. Now we want to define how the text is presented in the button. Do we want to align it to the left, the right, the center? Let's go ahead and align it to the center. Text align center. Okay. And the font size. Font size, let's go ahead and make this an 18 pixel font. So we'll make the letters bigger. And finally, when we hover over it, we want to know what kind of pointer we want on it. We actually want to make it clear that it's clicking something. So we're going to say that the cursor will be a pointer. Okay. So now we've defined the style for our button, and the next thing we have to do is tell the web page, tell the buttons to use that style. So we're going to go down to the button tag here, and we're going to add, after type, we want to add the class. So the class equals, and then since we call that a button style, we're also going to call this button down here. Okay, so the class equals button, and then you can copy and paste that. We're going to add this to the other button as well. Okay. So we have everything done here. We should have created the style section up here. We've defined the button style, and then we've added the class argument to our button tag down here, and we've called that button as well. And so if all goes well, it should work. Let's go ahead and save it. We'll refresh our page and see what happens. And now we've got these nice buttons with big text, and when we hover over it, the pointer changes from an arrow to a hand, a finger, a pointer finger, and when we click on the buttons, they still work, just as advertised. So this is pretty cool, but let's add just a little bit more style to it. What I'd like to do now is when we hover over this button, I'd like to make it appear a little bit different. So when I hover over it, I want it to change color just a little bit. So I'm going to add another style to this. I'm going to add, it's still a button style, but we're going to give it the condition when we're hovering. And we don't have to change the class at all in the button, because when we do this, this hover condition is automatically understood to be a condition on the button. So now all I have to do is define what I want to change when this happens. So I'm going to change the background color when it hovers. We're going to call this dark orange. That's all we have to do. Just that one little change, and then make sure that we end that with a curly brace again. Okay, and notice when now that I've clicked, or I'm touching that, both of them light up red, so I know where my code sits, and everything's looking pretty good. Got my style section here. Let's go ahead and save it or refresh. And now when we hover over it, notice it changes color. So go ahead, play with those colors. You can play with the fonts, the sizes. You can add a border. Make this your own, and we'll see you next time. This is Mr. Boyer. Good luck.